I'm really honored to be here. And I also want to thank Joanna Plafsky. I also want to thank Ed Schloman, Lorraine Cancro, also Robert Cancro. They're with ICAMI's Global Stress Initiative because they're the ones who inspired me to learn about TM. So I'm so grateful that all of you are here today. And you were talking about, Pamela, how we always go 180 miles an hour. I go 190 miles an hour. So I can relate to very much what you were saying and also Soledad was saying. And my life is so crazy. And I remember when I was introduced to TM, I went to a David Lynch event, sort of similar to what you guys are here. It was a gala event. And I remember when I went, I thought, oh, this will be interesting. I'm always curious as a journalist to sort of learn more and, explore different things. And I was blown away. I mean, look at the video that we just saw of this woman in Uganda and seeing the transformation and seeing the lives of women and men that had been affected by TM. It was staggering to me. And I was so overwhelmed. And I thought I would just kind of go and just watch as an observer. And I've always been a bit of a skeptic just on things in general. That's our nature as journalists. We're always the ones asking the crazy, tough questions. And when I went, I was just so profoundly moved and so impressed and so in awe to see people who have been affected, like this woman in Uganda, like veterans who have gone and seen the toughest battles, and to see them changed in their life forever. And to do something that's not pharmacological, to do something that everybody at home can do, something that's practical, something that's affordable, something that's easy to do. And I thought, wow, what an amazing thing. And to see that kind of peace, that some of those folks who have gone through some of the most severe situations, like the women that you have saved, and I thought if it can help them, it can help even crazy Rita Cosby. And it has. It has been one of the most beautiful experiences in my life. And for someone who has a crazy schedule like Pam and everybody else here in this room, Bobby said one of the most beautiful things to me, and I thought it was so great. You said, I know how crazy you are. You spend all your time covering everybody else. Find 15 or 20 minutes in the morning and afternoon for yourself. And I thought, how am I going to do this? I have to figure it in between breathing, as Pamela said. But I found it. And it has been one of the most amazing, most joyous moments in my life. And I hope for those of you in the room who have not experienced it here today will explore it for yourselves, because it has been an incredible transformation. I also want to just talk a little bit about post-traumatic stress, some of the things that Serena so beautifully talked about. Post-traumatic stress, just to give you an example of some of the staggering numbers that are out there. 500,000 men and women from Iraq and Afghanistan alone will have some form of PTSD. Think about that. I mean, that is a huge number. And as you talked about, it's something that we all have to care about as society. The effects that post-traumatic stress is having, whether it's someone who was raped, whether it is someone who has gone through military sexual trauma of some form, all these different degrees, it is something that we all have to care about as a society, because there's a dramatic trickling effect. And also an important effect for those who are taking care of those, like yourself. I thought it was so beautiful when you said, Lois, that the focus needs to be also making sure that the caregiver is taken care of, because so often the caregiver is forgotten. I know firsthand the effects that mental trauma can have on a family. Tara talked about the children. What many of you may not know in the room is I was that child. One Christmas, when I was a teenager, my own father just suddenly, abruptly left the family. I heard my parents arguing in the other room. My father said, I'm leaving. And I thought he was leaving work. It turned out he was leaving us. My father, like you, was a marathon runner. My father ran 33 marathons in his day. But my father was running away from something, running away from his own personal demons. I did not know my father until just a few years ago. I learned just a few years ago when I made a discovery in my mother's belongings. I found an old rusty POW tag, and I found a red and white bloody fighting Polish armband and a card with a code name on it, and a card of an ex-POW named Ryszard Kozabucki. And I realized at that moment, my father had been a prisoner of war. And what I learned was my father went through some pretty extraordinary things as a teenage fighter. Think about it, against the Nazis. And talks about one night how he was surrounded by gunfire, had to escape through the sewers, literally crawl through the sewers. He was later recaptured, and then he was taken to a POW camp. And my father, at 90 pounds and 6 feet tall, escaped from that POW camp, ultimately to be saved by U.S. troops. Absolutely. I'll applaud our U.S. troops any day of the week. How could experiencing something like that not affect the way that you would act towards your children? You talked about your son. How could it not affect your personal relationships? And I always thought, what happened to this man? How could he be so emotionally void, a zombie, numb, like you talked about so beautifully, Tara, and so courageously? But when you think about it, how could he even go on and function? And I think it's so incredible, those who have gone through incredible trauma like my father, and think about being a Nazi prisoner of war as a teenager, tortured, escaped, all the, just the most horrible things you can imagine. How could that not affect the next generation? My father was not able to relate to his own family for decades, and it left for me, as the next generation, a lot of anger, a lot of frustration, a lot of confusion. And I have found, not only my father, thank goodness, in the last few years, but also through the joy of transcendental meditation, a wonderful inner peace and a wonderful joy. And something that I've also experienced is talking to other caregivers. Because as you so beautifully said, it is so important to remember that there are so many people who are taking care of those, the next generation, and those who are experiencing some of the most severe cases. As a journalist, I sadly see people when either they're dead or they're near death. You've either done something really great if you see me at your door, or something really bad. I tell everybody, it's sort of, oh no, Rita's here, something happened. But unfortunately, we see some of the beautiful things in life, but we also get to see the very worst. And so I feel that this is one of the most amazing, think about affordable ways to make such an incredible, dramatic difference in people's lives. And those especially who are caregivers, there's some staggering statistics. I did a lot of research recently. 66% of the caregivers out there are women. This is something that women, I think we talked about by nature and some of the physiology and some of the medical research, but also we have that caregiving nature. So it's something that I think is so important. And post-traumatic stress affects women much more than men, as we talked about also from the caregiver perspective. There were some staggering numbers, 35% to 25% of the way that caregivers are affected by post-traumatic stress, the rub-off, by women. So it's something that I think we, as a nature of wanting to give and wanting to care and wanting to make a difference, we are also dramatically affected. And again, the children of the next generation. I don't want to repeat the numbers you said so beautifully, the effects that TM have had. 50% improvement, as Serena said. Think about it, among veterans and among people who have gone through some of the most horrific things, the people that you have seen firsthand and you've seen certainly in Africa too, and also the effects of people like my father. I wish in my own life that my father and I would have known TM many years ago. My father did not share what he went through for 65 years. Not just with his daughter, not just with my brother, but with his own wife, who he was married to for 32 years. I believe if TM had come into my life, he could have had an inner peace to free him from the demons of war, and I could have found my father that much sooner. Today, my dad is finally home, and thanks to TM, I can look at this journey that I have been on, a very personal, very deeply personal journey, and a very bumpy one, but be able to share it with other people. And hope that all of you learn today that there is a solution, within yourselves. There's an incredible inner peace and an incredible courage that we all have within ourselves. We just have to find it, and TM is a wonderful way to do so.